The desert wind carried dust across the empty road as Daniel Mercer rode, slowly beneath the fading gold of the evening sun. The land stretched endlessly around him, dry and quiet, the kind of silence that could swallow a man's thoughts if he let it. Daniel had lived most of his life among cattle, horses, and the long, lonely trails of the frontier. He was known as a fair man, not cruel like some ranchers who treated people the same way they treated their livestock. But fairness didn't always make life easier out here. 3 months of drought had ruined half his herd. Debts waited in town like wolves, and tonight he was riding back from a failed deal that had left him with little more than dust and regret. By the time he reached the trading post, the sky had turned purple with night. Lanterns flickered along the wooden porch, and the smell of whiskey and tobacco drifted through the warm air. Inside, men laughed loudly, boots thudding against the floorboards. Daniel stepped in quietly. Behind the counter stood a broad man named Carter Briggs, a trader who dealt in everything, from horses to rifles to things people preferred not to talk about openly. Briggs looked up and smirked. "Well, Daniel Mercer, thought you might have turned back by now." Daniel removed his hat slowly. "Needed supplies?" Briggs leaned against the counter. "You got money this time?" Daniel didn't answer right away. His eyes moved around the room until they landed on something in the corner. A young native woman sat there, wrists loosely bound with rope. Her dark hair fell across her face, and though she was still, there was a tension in her posture like a coiled spring. Daniel's chest tightened. "What's that about?" he asked quietly. Briggs followed his gaze and shrugged. "Apache girl. Traders brought her in yesterday. Said her tribe was wiped out up north. Nobody wants her. Thought maybe someone could use a servant." The words hung in the air like poison. Daniel had seen many ugly things in his life, but something about the girl's silence unsettled him. "She looks young," he said. "Old enough to work." Daniel turned back to the counter. "I'll take supplies on credit." Briggs chuckled. "You know I don't do credit anymore." Daniel placed the small pouch of coins he had left on the counter. "It was barely enough for a week's food. That's all I've got." Briggs weighed the pouch in his hand. "Not enough." Daniel's jaw tightened. Briggs glanced toward the girl again, then smiled slowly. "Tell you what, take the supplies. And the girl. Consider it a package deal." Daniel stared at him. "I don't buy people." Briggs shrugged. "You're not buying her. You're taking responsibility. Otherwise she goes to someone worse." The room grew quiet. The girl lifted her head slightly. For the first time, Daniel saw her eyes. They were dark and steady, not pleading, not afraid, just watching. Something inside him shifted. "Fine," Daniel said quietly. Briggs grinned. "Pleasure." Doing business. An hour later, Daniel rode out of the trading post with a wagon of supplies, and the girl sitting silently beside him. The moon had risen high when she finally spoke. "You are not like the others." Her English was careful but clear. Daniel glanced at her. "Don't mistake me for a good man." "You freed my hands." "That's not kindness. It's common sense." She studied him. "My name is Ayanna." Daniel nodded once. "Daniel." Silence returned as the wagon creaked along the trail. After a while she asked, "Why did you take me?" Daniel stared ahead at the silver horizon. "Because leaving you there felt worse." The days that followed were uneasy. Ayanna stayed at the ranch house, helping with small chores. She moved quietly, observing everything. Daniel noticed she worked harder than anyone he'd ever hired. She rose before sunrise and rarely spoke unless spoken to. But there was something unusual about her. She rode horses with perfect balance. She tracked animals better than Daniel's best ranch hand. And sometimes he caught her watching the distant hills, as if waiting for something. One evening, as they sat beside the fire, Daniel finally asked, "You said your tribe was wiped out?" Ayanna didn't answer right away. The flames reflected in her eyes. "Not wiped out," she said slowly. "Scattered." Daniel frowned. "Why lie about that?" "I did not lie." She met his gaze. "Your trader did." Daniel felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "What aren't you telling me?" Ayanna looked into the fire again. "For now. It is safer you do not know." 2 weeks passed. Then one night everything changed. Daniel woke to the sound of horses. Not one or two, dozens. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. The moonlight revealed dark silhouettes surrounding the ranch. Warriors, Apache warriors. Daniel's heart pounded. He raised his rifle slowly. Then he saw Ayana step past him into the open yard. The warriors immediately lowered their weapons. One rider approached, tall and broad, with feathers woven into his long black hair. He dismounted and knelt before Ayana. Daniel blinked in disbelief. The warrior spoke in Apache. His voice carried urgency and respect. Ayana answered calmly. Then she turned back to Daniel. The moonlight illuminated her face differently now, stronger, colder. "There is something you must know," she said softly. Daniel lowered the rifle. "Go on." She gestured toward the kneeling warrior. "This is Nantan, my father's war chief." Daniel's stomach dropped. "And your father?" Ayana looked toward the distant mountains. "He is Chief Takoda." The name hit Daniel like thunder. Takoda was one of the most powerful Apache leaders in the territory. Men in towns whispered about him with fear. Daniel stared at her. "You're telling me?" She nodded. "I am his daughter." For a moment the world felt strangely quiet. "You could have told me earlier," Daniel said. "If I had, you might have turned me in for reward money." Daniel sighed. Fair point." Ayana studied his face carefully. "You treated me with respect even when you believed I was nothing." Daniel shrugged. "That's just how people should treat each other." She smiled faintly. "You say that like it is simple." Behind her, the warriors waited patiently. Finally, she spoke again. "My father sent them when I did not return. He feared I was captured. And now? I must return with them." Daniel felt something unexpected twist in his chest. He nodded. "Of course." She stepped closer. "You could come with us." Daniel blinked. "I'm a rancher, not a tribal guest. My father respects men who show honor." Daniel looked around his ranch. Broken fences, dying cattle, mounting debt. He laughed quietly. "Well, I suppose I don't have much keeping me here." The journey to the Apache camp took 2 days. When they arrived, Daniel expected hostility. Instead, he found a village filled with watchful curiosity. Chief Takoda stood tall in the center of the camp. His presence was powerful and calm, like a mountain that had seen centuries pass. Ayana approached him first. They spoke softly. Then Takoda turned to Daniel. The chief studied him for a long moment. "You protected my daughter," he said in careful English. Daniel shifted slightly. "I didn't know who she was. That makes it more honorable." Takoda stepped forward. "In our way, debts of honor must be repaid." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't do it for reward." Takoda smiled faintly. "Perhaps not." He looked toward the surrounding warriors. "But you have gained something greater." Daniel frowned. "What's that?" Takoda gestured toward the tribe. "Trust." The days that followed changed Daniel in ways he never expected. He stayed among the Apache, learning their ways, their stories, their connection to the land. For the first time in his life, he felt part of something deeper than survival. And Ayana was always nearby. They rode together across the desert valleys. They spoke beneath endless star-filled skies. Slowly, something unspoken grew between them. One night, beside a quiet fire, Daniel finally said what had been sitting in his chest for weeks. "You changed my life." Ayana tilted her head. "How?" "I thought the world was just ranches, towns, money, and survival." "And now?" Daniel looked at the glowing embers. "Now I see it's bigger." She watched him carefully. "You could still return to your ranch." Daniel shook his head slowly. That place was never really home. Silence settled between them. Then Ayana reached for his hand. "In that case," she whispered, "perhaps you have finally found where you belong." Years later, travelers sometimes spoke of a strange story. A cowboy who once accepted a slave as payment and unknowingly changed the course of his life. But those who truly knew the story understood something deeper. He had not rescued a helpless woman. He had simply chosen kindness, and in return, fate had led him to a destiny far greater than anything he had ever imagined.